I did give my word that the next time we recorded an episode that I would start off with a comment that was presented to all three of us. So let me go ahead and fish up that comment real quick. Okay. I'm gonna leave the name out of this, obviously the person, but thank you again for the comment. They said, "Why so careful and apologetic? You guys are doing the Jon Stewart light touch approach to the conversation. Sweet Baby Inc. is/was a pandemic era style grift, and it does not deserve any success for that welfare approach to creative contributions. The question we should be asking is why can't they, or us black people, have our own game development studio? Why do we always need they to give us our value and acknowledge us? Otherwise, good show." So, do any of you gentlemen want to address that question first?
I'll go first. First off, I think it mostly narrows down to startup capital, because startup capital, first of all, like you got to build it from the ground up. Like, and this is why industry building is such a very hit and miss. It requires so much attention, so much support, because if you're literally starting over from fresh, what are you pulling from? Who are you going to hire? What are you going to put out? What is the cost of these things?
Mm-hmm.
And who are your investors and what are your investors looking for? And then, to be honest, you got to even say it out loud. What color are your investors? Because
Facts.
there's many quotes that are out there. Who funds you? He who funds you controls you.
As we've seen this generation,
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of like control, like from particular parent companies about certain products that just go left away from the developers initial thought process. So I think it's startup capital and just like, yeah, resources, man, resources. And because I do feel it is time for, and, I get it, we live in an intertwined world, but we also have to understand is, in order to do yourself justice, you have to do it yourself. You have to do it yourself. And I do feel like, that better representation is actually needed. Because maybe if it was really truly built from the ground up from people who have a genuine understanding, I do feel like some of these releases would actually be much better in terms of quality. Even, exploring the different diversities of different Black people. Because, there's multiple ways to be Black. There's Gothic Blacks. There's what you would consider traditional Blacks, but then that could even range from where you're from. Because you got UK Black, you got Canadian Black, you got African Black, you got Afro-Caribbean. Like, there's just so many avenues that you have to really explore. But I just do still feel go back to the point where, like, yes, startup capital, and how do you sustain this? Like, once you start it, how do you maintain it?
True. It's a question.
And especially from what we've learned from a particular documentary about And1, the pushback from other corporations.
Bro, that documentary was so heartbreaking. For all those who are listening or watching, if you guys were ever familiar with And1, the basketball company, the street basketball company, it's on Netflix. It is one of the most eye-opening things you will see about what happens when the powers that be decide you're getting too much leverage.
Yes. and let's be honest here, bro. Like, these companies are sharks, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Once they smell that blood in the water, or once they even see a healthy meal in the water, they are going to come for you.
Yeah.
In the most diplomatic way possible.
Yeah. It was.
So it's a lot of there's a high chance of failure. That's basically what it is. And I kind of feel like it's the easier route to just cling to what exists. And because creating something is very scary, man, because will it be receptive to the public, and will it be nurtured by the public?
Yes.
But you just got to go forward, or else we're just going to keep playing the broken record over and over and over.
We'll keep asking the same question. We'll keep having the same talking points. We'll never get to an answer, and we'll just rely on like you said, the safe measures. And I think there is some truth that it's going to take a level of risk, a risk that may not immediately pay off or pay off at all. S. Rank, what are your thoughts on the question that was posed? How do we make focus studios for minority groups, if that's even possible?
No, it's super possible. I think it's going to require more community work versus one man being the forefront. It'll be many people with their projects coming together. We'll support this. We'll support this one for until this gets off the ground. Then we'll support you. It'll just have to be a table of circles to like you'll pass down. It'll have to be people with the common interest supporting each other, building a community first before money gets involved. Working out the financial groundwork, the capital. But there's ways to get that. We've talked offline multiple times. You already know my favorite saying. You already know my favorite clip in movies, my favorite meme. I'll do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, right? Because you're gonna get tired of asking for permission, right? If these people don't, I can find a stain in my favorite anime, right? I love Dragon Ball Z. Am I thrilled at how they portrayed some of the characters of color,
Right.
especially our characters of color?
Right.
When you can draw a Native American with accuracy, you can draw an Indian. I'll never forget when a lot of us, for whatever reason, Oob is black, Oob is black, Oob is black. Like they desperately wanted that character to be that. But when I started to pay attention, I said, no, I noticed Oob wasn't black once I saw his village.
Mm-hmm.
He's of Arab, right? Majin Buu is an Arab concept introduced in Dragon Ball Z. He's technically a genie,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you look at Majin Buu is a genie,
Yeah.
or whatever he
A
is.
Jin.
Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Popo is a Jin,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how Jins are depicted and drawn. And so, you have enough of this pattern, even with Taito Kubo, with some of the black characters and their transformations. You're like, yo, you had it until you didn't, right?
But you
So
did have
these
it.
things,
Because
yeah, you did
Tosin, it
have
does
it.
look fire. Like you
Yeah,
can't.
Tosin looks fire, but then when you see his ultimate pinnacle,
Mm-hmm. The
right, his
fly.
pinnacle form, those are true. Like the story of Dark Moon, Dark Shine, right? We was like, oh man, this is dope until it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, it's all up, yeah. Like look at Supreme Team, Supreme Dream.
Mm-hmm.
They got a con going on, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They found a way to make it happen, and yeah, supports, presence, and I think it all comes down to you just building a community first, man. I don't think it's impossible. It just has to get started.
Yeah.
Whether it be one man or a group of people, I think if you have more like-minded people in the room, that's how a village gets started. So one of them is going to know how to do this. One of them is going to know how to finance. One of them, I mean, how many of us know lawyers in
Right.
this chair? We know effective people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about making sure we pitch a vision together collectively. And it's not built off of animosity, but it's built off of a consistent displeasure and portrayal. And we wouldn't be having these conversations if image didn't matter, right? Nobody would be getting mad at the later topics we'll cover,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nobody would be mad if it didn't really matter. It obviously does,
Right.
right? Portrayal does matter on both sides. So that's not even up for debate anymore. You can't, if you want to see why people get mad or why people don't have aren't favoring a certain decision that you made, but 100% I agree with Tim. I just think it's actually it's a lot easier now to get it done, man. It's a lot easier now to support a vision. I don't think it's impossible. I think people are waiting and people want. And once someone decides to get going, hey, look at how this podcast came to be. It was passion for what we loved. Someone had the vision. They said, "Yo, why am I having these in-depth conversations through text?" And I felt these things were in the universe couldn't think of any better concepts or rebuttals for some of the stuff that goes on in gaming media and
Mm-hmm.
anime.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we come together. It takes that first step. Oh,
To further on your point, Jory, I also, and to touch back on community, that is also very, I would say, this is the dark side of thing. We also have very fragmented community because, due to societal pressures and, everybody's trying to be the it man. Like, oh, I want to be the one that stands out.
The forefront leader of this. Yes.
Yeah, I want my name here. Right? And then that pride and ego hurts the greater vision for on a collective scale.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also a thing that we have to really address, bro. Like
No.
fragmented community.
100%. But the thing I fully believe if you expose those idea points, that it'll bring forth clarity onto what the vision is, or whenever a community is present. Some of these things you don't want to not mention, right? It's just like a relationship with a significant other. There's some things that you just can't leave up to assumption, right? You have to expose it. You have to let it be known. Hey, this is what I expect of XYZ. This is what we stand for. This is what we don't stand for. This is what I don't want. This is if how long will I allow this one flaw to be? And this is, these are the things that we conversate about. It's not even about, because for a fact, if we're going to build a community, it can't be a one-man show. Michael Jordan means nothing without the Chicago Bulls.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're you understand what it takes to make, we have enough experience to see how a game goes, where a game goes wrong, where companies go wrong, where churches go wrong, where friendships go wrong, but this is something that matters to a lot of people that care for. There's a lot of guys arguing those same points. And you'll be able to tell, if you'll make the vision so clearly. Listen, if you're not okay with being a blade of grass or a pillar that can hold a highway,
This isn't
then
for you.
this isn't for you. We're trying to build a road. None of those pillars do we say don't matter. All of them do. If you move one, that roadway, especially over water, which is what a lot of us might be battling, not to drown, it's going to be problematic. I think when you don't expose those hidden things in the society, you exposing that, hey, we're fragmented, that is awareness right there in itself. That is a point of to now we can actually see what's in the room versus us going in the dark with flashlights and bumping into things and tripping over wires that the light bulbs that we have couldn't see. So we all collectively decide to point in one direction, our lights, and now we can mitigate that darkness together. I fully believe it's super plausible now more than ever.
I agree. I think, and it's
there is a dark side though.
Yeah, there's a dark side.
That,
I do want to give, because I agree with both of you guys on this. I think the thing that because I've given this a lot of thought since I said we were going to talk about this on the podcast, and it gave me a terminology that I'm just going to call the BET effect. So what I mean by the BET effect is you ask 10 different Black people, what is BET? And you're going to get 10 different answers more often than not. Part of the reason is because it's hard for one lane of something to be representative of, like Tim said, these fragmented communities. You do this for this people, but what about them? You do this for them, but what about them? And I think the issue that the gaming community is having, especially when it comes to minority highlighting, is because something has to kind of start it. What is the forefront of this that appeals to enough people to get the other communities their spotlight, right? So I use like an example of, like, for example, I bring this up a lot with the Miles Morales game, where it's like, yes, Miles is Black and Puerto Rican, but that wasn't the forefront of the game of like how Black and Puerto Rican he is, right? He just happened to be a kid who came from that heritage, who was in the superhero story, and we've embraced it. Now it's to a point where people are a little bit more open-minded to where these other superhero or just other minority-led stories might bring us. So I think when it comes to starting our own, I agree with both of you guys. I just think the issue that we have, especially in communities like that, is, to Tim's point, is that we don't give the people who are brave enough to start enough leeway to figure it out, right? Like when we first started this podcast, one of the things we covered was, to your point, Jory, about what one of these girls who attended DreamCon had to say about how certain things didn't play out. And she was very critical, and all of her points were valid. Of all the things that she said, I stood in line for 45 minutes. I didn't even get to meet the creator I was in line for, so on and so forth. However, this is DreamCon number 2. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can guarantee you that Comic-Con had the same exact issues, if not worse, their first couple of years. I can guarantee you that all these things that we come to herald every year, the Grammys, the Oscars, the Emmys, have had critical issues that have kind of absolved themselves over time. We're about to talk about the Game Awards, night and day from last year, night and day.
Night and day. Night and day.
So I think that's the thing that, to answer the question of the comment, and then we'll kind of move on, is like, I think we're all in agreement of this, of like, I think there just needs to be enough runway and enough grace given to allow some of these things to take off, right? You can't just, it can't be like, well, if it's not right out the gate, I just won't support it at all. You know what I'm saying? Like the pink sauce lady didn't pan out for her. Doesn't mean that there shouldn't be more black innovators in the cooking industry making their own sauces. It's just, she happened to not be the one. Right. I think we would do ourselves a disservice of being like, well, we saw him with the pink sauce lady. Can't support that again. It's like, you're not, saying you're not helping yourself in that way. So I think, when it comes to our own studios and our own stories, I think this whole marriage of we need to go to the quote unquote other cultures for approval, I don't think that's necessary. But you want to do it in a way that is being able to be embraced by other people outside of us, because that's what's been happening with other things, right? Yeah. You said it many times on this podcast, Jory. We as a collective don't have an issue with Batman being white. It just is what it is. We enjoy his stories. We enjoy the characters. We enjoy the world. It's not about like, well, he was white, so I couldn't relate, But I also have to be able to give that same level of, let me see how this plays out, to a static shock. I still have to be able to be like, let me take the village hidden in the cloud as seriously as I do the village hidden in the sand. Like we have to kind of give highlights to these moments of like, yeah, Bleach didn't get it right with black characters overall, but it was nice to see. We got somewhere, like we did. There's a template. There's something here. It's a lot better than what we got in the 90s. So, I think ultimately that's the thing. And I hope that we're able to answer the question. And if not, again, comment section is open. We just wanted to do something, at least to start off the show, to, obviously acknowledge and show appreciation to the feedback that we get from our viewers and listeners.
I will say this to close out this topic. You have to your point, and to add on to your point, we do have to cultivate a mental appreciation and a mental support. Doesn't have to be money. It can just be with it getting exposure. Mm-hmm. Right? This thing got a million views in how many minutes? Things like that's a start. Right? So it's gonna inspire a lot. I do think just getting exposure, supporting in however fashion you can. Giving exposure, man, that's one of the first things that takes place for something like this. If we'll just have to purposely support. We'll have to support black folks who want to go outside the boundaries of creativity, who aren't afraid to tell stories that will gravitate everybody in the world. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You need more of those guys at the forefront. That'll widen, and it'll benefit the stories that are very focused and the very stories that are out there as well. You just want to be able to tell a story without people having to put it in a box. We need to get to that point to where there's a variety of black folks that can tell a story. And of course, I always say, tell the story you want to tell. Of course, that's the first step. Then everybody else will eventually start to do things that are different.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I think there's a sister out there who has an anime Moesha, slice of life anime that's in her. She doesn't want to do television broadcasting. She loves anime media, but she's not a big action lady. She wants to tell data life stories, probably with one episode that's action based because of whatever's taking place in her life. But that's what there's women like that. I believe so, but they don't feel like they have a voice, or it's just so many. That story is not going to exist without an action or a whatever story that's the best that it could be, right? I think what we suffer from, we need to make sure that when we tell a story, we tell a good story. The products just have to be good, man. And I think eventually after time, in a short time, I really believe that, we'll have the very thing he's asking for, we'll have that. And I don't think it's far off. I really believe that it's happening. We have more aware ears. Um, and it's a good thing that people are a lot more sensitive to other people's issues. And I think it'll come into its own being, man. Just like with the DreamCon, it'll come into its own being. And you know, just be ready to support and have grace. Give people grace to mess up. If you can, hey, your writing's struggling, your drawing's not that great. I know a guy who can draw just as good. Hey, would you be willing? And that's
Right.
how you build, man.
Yeah.
It's not a one-man show. We can't afford to have one-man shows.
Yes.
You know,
We're at
we
a
can't
point
afford to
now
have.
where, again, I think the opportunities that are being allowed to certain smaller groups, the general, especially given the economy overall, like you don't have as much leeway to kind of uh, return a subpar product, and not because it focused on a particular group. It's just that's just the way it is with everything, right? That's been the constant lament of the industry this year that we talk about. Like you have studios closing left, right, and center because to these publishers and these funders and these investors, you returned subpar results through our eyes.